It was Sunday dinner when I finally reached my breaking point. I watched silently as Vanessa placed my plate at the small wooden table in the corner of the kitchen, away from the beautiful dining room where my son Michael and the rest of the family would be eating. "You don't mind, do you, Ruth? We have the Robertsons coming over, and I just couldn't fit another chair at the table," she said with that particular smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I nodded, keeping my face carefully neutral. "Of course not. Dear." This hadn't been the first time. For months now, I'd been gradually relegated from family member to something closer to household help. First, it was subtle. My opinions gently dismissed during family discussions. My offers to help cook dinner accepted, but my recipes rejected. Then it became more overt, being asked to watch the grandchildren in another room during gatherings, having my suggestions for family vacations laughed off as old-fashioned, and now, eating alone in the kitchen while important guests dined with my son in the spacious dining room of the house that, unbeknownst to Vanessa, I completely owned. The irony wasn't lost on me as I glanced around at the gleaming granite countertops and custom cabinets I had paid to renovate last spring. The hardwood floors beneath my feet had been installed using money from my retirement fund. The Sub-Zero refrigerator humming quietly in the corner had been my housewarming gift. Every inch of this house belonged to me, held in a trust I had, established after Henry died. Michael knew, of course, but Vanessa believed they had purchased it together, with a little help from me with the down payment. The truth was far different. After losing Henry 5 years ago to a sudden heart attack, I had sold our large family home and downsized to a modest apartment. With the proceeds from the sale and Henry's life insurance, I had purchased this house outright. The beautiful craftsman in Cedar Heights that Michael and Vanessa had fallen in love with, but couldn't possibly afford on their combined salaries. I set up a trust, allowing them to live there while maintaining ownership. I only asked that they cover the property taxes and utilities, far less than a mortgage would have been. Why the secrecy? Perhaps it was pride, not wanting Vanessa to feel indebted. Perhaps it was protection, ensuring my grandchildren would always have a stable home regardless of what happened. Or perhaps it was simply love, wanting to give my only son the life I thought he deserved without making a show of my financial support. But sitting there at that small kitchen table, staring at the wall instead of enjoying the company of my family, I began to wonder if my discretion had been a mistake. The sound of laughter floated in from the dining room, the warm, comfortable sound of people enjoying themselves together. I picked at my roast beef, which had gone cold during Vanessa's elaborate plating process for the real guests. My mind wandered to the folder sitting in my handbag, the one from Dr. Brenner's office containing the test results I'd received on Thursday. Stage 2 breast cancer. Treatable, certainly, but requiring immediate surgery followed by radiation, possibly chemotherapy. The treatment plan Dr. Brenner had outlined would cost thousands beyond what my insurance would cover. Money I had, thankfully. But support? Looking around at the empty kitchen, listening to my family entertain strangers while I sat alone with my diagnosis still unshared, I wasn't so sure. I placed my fork down beside my barely touched meal. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Michael refilling wine glasses, laughing at something Mr. Robertson had said. He caught my eye briefly, his expression flickering with what might have been guilt before Vanessa pulled his attention back to their guests. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Vanessa looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Ruth, would you mind getting that?" she called, not bothering to look in my direction. I stood slowly, my knees protesting after sitting too long in the uncomfortable kitchen chair. As I made my way to the front door, I could hear Vanessa explaining my presence to their guests. "My mother-in-law lives nearby. She helps out with the children sometimes." "Helps out?" as though I hadn't raised the children 3 days a week for the past 4 years, while Vanessa pursued her real estate career and Michael worked long hours at the law firm. As though I hadn't been the one teaching Emma to read or showing Jake how to tie his shoes. As though I were an occasional visitor rather than a fundamental pillar of their family life. I opened the door to find Diane, my closest friend since college days, standing on the porch with a concerned expression. "You didn't answer your phone," she said by way of greeting. "I wanted to check if you'd told them yet." Diane was the only person who knew about my diagnosis. She'd driven me to the appointment and held my hand as Dr. Brenner delivered the news. "Not yet," I murmured, stepping outside and pulling the door nearly closed behind me. "They have guests." Diane's eyebrows shot up. "Guests? Ruth, this is your health we're talking about. Your family should know." I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 64 years. "They're busy. I'll tell them tomorrow." Diane wasn't having it. She'd always been the more outspoken of the two of us, the one who called situations exactly as she saw them. "Where are they now? Eating dinner? You should be with them, not out here with me." I hesitated, not wanting to admit the truth. But Diane had known me too long. She read the answer in my silence. "They're making you eat separately again, aren't they?" I couldn't meet her eyes. "Oh, Ruth." Her voice softened with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "This has to stop. Where were you eating? The kitchen?" I nodded. "In your own house? The one you bought for them?" "Technically, yes, but they don't know that. Not Vanessa, anyway." I leaned against the porch railing, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Michael knows, of course, but he's never told her. We agreed it would be better that way." Diane crossed her arms. "Better for whom, exactly? Because from where I'm standing, it's only better for Vanessa's ego and Michael's conflict avoidance." She wasn't wrong. The arrangement had seemed sensible at the time, a way to help without undermining the young couple's sense of achievement. Michael had been grateful but embarrassed by his need for financial assistance. Keeping the true ownership quiet had been his idea. "It's not just the house," I found myself saying, the words tumbling out after months of silent endurance. "It's everything. The way she speaks to me, the way she's gradually pushed me to the edges of their lives while still expecting me to be available whenever they need childcare or help with housework." From inside, I heard the distinctive sound of Vanessa's laughter, followed by the deeper tones of my son's voice agreeing with whatever had been said. "It hasn't always been this way," I continued, feeling a need to be fair despite everything. "When Emma was born, Vanessa was different, warmer, more inclusive. She used to ask my advice about motherhood, about recipes, about life. Somewhere along the way, that changed." Diane's expression remained skeptical. "People don't just change without reason. Did something happen?" I thought back, trying to pinpoint the shift. Her career took off about 2 years ago. She started selling high-end properties in Cedar Heights and mixing with a different social circle. More affluent people. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Brenner's office sat on the coffee table between us, its contents representing not just a health crisis but a crossroads. "You know," Diane said, curling her legs beneath her on the sofa. "Henry wouldn't have stood for this. He would have put Vanessa in her place the first time she tried to sideline you." A smile tugged at my lips despite everything. She was right. Henry had been unfailingly kind, but also straightforward to the point of bluntness. He'd called situations exactly as he saw them, regardless of social niceties. "He would have hated seeing me eat in the kitchen," I admitted. "He would have picked up his plate and joined you there," Diane corrected. "And then he would have had a very direct conversation with Michael about respect." The image made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. I missed Henry with a suddenness that took my breath away. Missed his solid presence, his unwavering support, his absolute certainty about right and wrong. "I've been too accommodating," I said quietly. "Too willing to step aside, to make things easier for everyone else. Henry always said it was both my greatest strength and my worst flaw." Diane reached across to squeeze my hand. "It's not too late to change that pattern, Ruth. Starting with telling them about your diagnosis and being honest about your expectations for support." I nodded slowly, considering her words. The prospect of confrontation, of asserting my needs after years, of quietly setting them aside, was daunting. But the alternative was facing cancer treatments alone while continuing to be marginalized by the very people who should be supporting me. "I'll tell them tomorrow," I decided. "I'll ask Michael to come to my apartment so we can talk privately. First, then we can decide how to tell Vanessa and the children." "Good." Diane looked satisfied. "And the house?" I hesitated. "One thing at a time. The diagnosis is enough for now." But later that night, lying awake in Diane's guest room with moonlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains, I found myself reconsidering. The house had been meant as a gift, a way to provide security for my son and his family. Instead, it had somehow become the setting for my own diminishment. The house that should have represented my love and generosity had instead become a showcase where I was increasingly unwelcome. Perhaps it was time for some honesty on that front as well. Not out of spite or vengeance, but simply as a reality check. A reminder that families were built on mutual respect and appreciation, not one-sided giving and taking. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Michael. "Hope you're having fun with Diane. Vanessa wanted me to tell you that you don't need to come by tomorrow after all. Emma has a play date and Jake's going to a birthday party. She'll call you when she needs you next." When she needs you next? Not when they'd like to see me, not when the children miss their grandmother, but when Vanessa requires my services. I set the phone down without replying, a plan beginning to form in my mind, one that would require courage and directness I hadn't exercised in years, one that Henry would have approved of wholeheartedly. Tomorrow would bring change. I would make sure of it. Morning came with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I woke in Diane's guest room to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. For a moment, I simply lay there, considering the path ahead. The diagnosis had acted as a catalyst, forcing me to recognize patterns I'd been ignoring for too long. I reached for my phone, ignoring Michael's text from the night before, and called Harold Jenkins, the attorney who had helped me establish the trust for the house and had managed my financial affairs since Henry's death. "Ruth," he greeted me warmly. "How are you? It's been a while." "I need to make some changes to the trust arrangements," I said without preamble. "How soon can we meet?" There was a pause, then Harold's voice, more serious now. "Is everything all right?" "No," I answered honestly, "but it will be. Are you free this morning?" We arranged to meet at 10, giving me time for breakfast with Diane and a stop at my apartment to change clothes. As I dressed, selecting a blue blouse that Henry had always said matched my eyes, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked, tired certainly, the strain of recent months evident in the lines around my eyes and mouth. But there was something else there too, a determination I hadn't seen in my own reflection for quite some time. "You've got this, old girl," I told my reflection, a habit I'd developed after Henry died. Talking to myself had become a comfort during those first lonely months of widowhood. At Harold's office, I laid out everything: my cancer diagnosis, the treatment costs, and most importantly, the situation with Michael and Vanessa. "So you want to sell the house?" Harold asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "No," I shook my head. "The house is for my grandchildren's security. That hasn't changed. But I do want to clarify the ownership situation. Make it explicit, rather, than something only mentioned in legal documents no one bothers to read." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "We could restructure the trust to make your role as benefactor clearer. Perhaps require family meetings about major household decisions. There are several approaches we could take. We spent the next hour discussing options, eventually settling on a plan that would protect my interests while still providing for my family. It wasn't about punishment. It was about recognition and respect. "There's one more thing," I said as our meeting concluded. "I need to make arrangements for my medical expenses. The treatment plan Dr. Brenner has outlined will cost approximately $30,000 beyond what insurance covers." Harold's expression softened. "The trust has more than adequate reserves for that. I'll set up a separate account for your medical needs immediately." He hesitated, then added, "Ruth, have you told Michael about your diagnosis?" "Not yet. I plan to today." He nodded. "Good. Family should stick together during health crises. No matter what other issues may exist. Family should stick together." The words echoed in my mind as I left his office, my purse now containing updated trust documents that spelled out in black and white exactly what I had provided for Michael and Vanessa, and what I expected in return. Now came the harder part. I called Michael from the parking lot. "I need to speak with you. It's important. Can you meet me for lunch?" "Today?" He sounded distracted. "I have a pretty full schedule, Mom." "It's important," I repeated, letting a firmness I rarely used color my tone. "Nolan's Bistro, noon." There was a pause, then, "Okay, is everything all right? We'll talk at lunch." I arrived early, selecting a quiet table near the back where we would have privacy. My hands shook slightly as I arranged the medical folder and trust documents side by side on the table. More status-conscious people. And suddenly her middle-class mother-in-law didn't fit the image anymore, Diane finished for me. Put so bluntly, it hurt, but I couldn't deny the accuracy of her assessment. "I suppose so." Diane took my hands in hers, her touch warm and familiar after nearly 40 years of friendship. "Ruth, you need to tell them about the diagnosis. You need their support right now, not their dinner scraps and back kitchen banishment. And if they can't provide that support freely, then perhaps it's time they understood exactly what you've done for them." I pulled my hands away gently. "I'm not going to use my health as leverage, Diane, and I'm not going to reveal the house situation out of spite. It's not spite to expect basic human decency from your family. It's not leverage to let them know you're ill and need help." Diane's voice had taken on the same tone she used when arguing cases before her retirement from the district attorney's office. "And it's certainly not wrong to expect gratitude for your generosity." The front door opened wider, revealing Vanessa. She was wearing the cream silk blouse I'd given her for Christmas, the one she'd claimed was not really my style, but apparently was suitable for the Robertsons. "Oh, hello, Diane," she said, her voice pleasant but her eyes questioning. "I didn't realize we were expecting you this evening." "You weren't," Diane replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I was checking on Ruth." "Is everything all right?" Vanessa asked, looking between us with what appeared to be genuine concern. These moments, these glimpses of the kinder woman I'd once believed my son was marrying, made the situation all the more confusing. "Everything's fine," I assured her quickly. "Diane was just leaving." "Actually," Diane interjected, "I was hoping to steal Ruth away for the evening. Girls' night. We have some catching up to do." Vanessa's forehead creased slightly. "Oh, but what about dessert? And the children were hoping Grandma would read them a bedtime story." The contradiction was striking. I wasn't important enough to eat dinner with the adults, but I was essential for children's stories and kitchen cleanup. "I'm sure the children will understand," Diane said firmly. "Ruth deserves an evening out." Vanessa looked as though she wanted to object, but couldn't find a reasonable argument. "Well, all right then. I'll just get your coat, Ruth." As she disappeared back into the house, Diane gave me a pointed look. "See what I mean? She only wants you on her terms." She's not a bad person, I said softly. Just self-absorbed, status-conscious. Those aren't exactly glowing character references, Diane muttered. Vanessa returned with my coat, and Michael appeared behind her, his expression curious. Mom, are you leaving? Is everything okay? There was genuine concern in his voice, reminding me of the sensitive boy he'd once been, the one who brought home injured birds and cried at sad movies. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Diane and I are going to have a girls' night. I slipped my coat on, acutely aware of the medical folder still sitting in my purse on the kitchen counter. I'll call you tomorrow. Michael looked relieved, though, whether it was concern for me or simply the awkwardness of explaining my early departure to their guests, I couldn't tell. Okay, have fun. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, whispering, Thanks for understanding about dinner. Vanessa was just trying to impress the Robertsons. He could be a big client. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. This was the justification. Every time, some client to impress, some colleague to court, some friend whose opinion apparently mattered more than treating family with dignity. As Diane drove us away from Cedar Heights toward her apartment in Riverside, I turned to look. Back at the house, my house, with its warm lights glowing behind tasteful curtains. From the outside, it looked like the perfect family home. No one passing by would guess at the complicated dynamics within, or that the elderly woman being ushered out the door was actually the owner of that beautiful property. You can stay with me tonight, Diane said, interrupting my thoughts. I changed the sheets in the guest room this morning anyway. Thank you. I was suddenly exhausted, the weight of my diagnosis and the evening's subtle humiliations pressing down on me. I appreciate it. That's what friends are for. Diane navigated onto the main road. Now, we need to talk about your treatment plan. Dr. Brenner mentioned surgery within the month, right? I nodded, my hand instinctively moving to my left breast where the small lump had been discovered during my annual mammogram. He wants to do a lumpectomy followed by radiation. The prognosis is good if we move quickly. And the cost? I sighed. Even with insurance, I'm looking at about $30,000 out of pocket, more if complications arise. Diane whistled low. That's substantial. Can you manage it? Yes? The irony wasn't lost on me. The trust that holds the house has a cash reserve for maintenance and emergencies. I can use that. The trust that Michael and Vanessa benefit from while treating you like hired help? Diane couldn't keep the edge from her voice. I stared out, the window at the passing streetlights, each one blurring into a streak of gold against the darkening sky. It wasn't always like this, you know. When Henry was alive, when the children were smaller. We were a real family then. People change, Diane said softly. Sometimes not for the better. We drove in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. I found myself remembering the early days after Michael and Vanessa's wedding, how she'd call me for advice about cooking Michael's favorite meals, how she'd invited me shopping to help decorate their first apartment. When had that eager, somewhat insecure young woman transformed into someone who could banish her husband's mother to the kitchen without a second thought? I keep thinking about Emma and Jake, I said finally. My grandchildren. If I create conflict with Vanessa, they're the ones who will suffer. Diane sighed as she pulled into her apartment complex. And if you continue as things are, hiding your diagnosis, enabling Vanessa's behavior, what example does that set for them? That it's okay to treat people who love you as if they don't matter. That appearances are more important than kindness. She had a point, one that nagged at me as we entered her apartment and settled in the living room with cups of herbal tea. The folder from Dr. I ordered a pot of tea while I waited, the familiar ritual helping to calm my nerves. Michael arrived at 12:15, looking harried. Sorry I'm late, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Court ran long. What's so urgent? Is it the kids? I studied my son's face, the face I had once known better than my own. The boy I had nursed through chickenpox and heartbreaks, taught to ride a bike and drive a car, helped move into his college dorm and his first apartment. Somewhere along the way, that boy had become a man I barely recognized, one who could watch his mother eat alone in the kitchen while he entertained guests in the dining room. "No, it's not about the children," I said calmly. "It's about me, and about the house." His expression shifted, wariness replacing concern. "What about the house?" Instead of answering directly, I slid the medical folder toward him. "I had some tests done last week. The results came back on Thursday." Michael's eyes widened as he opened the folder, scanning the diagnostic report with his attorney's precision. "Cancer?" His voice cracked on the word. "Mom, why didn't you tell me immediately?" "I tried to," I said simply. "Last night, but you were entertaining the Robertsons, and I was in the kitchen." His face flushed. That was Vanessa's idea. She thought, "I know what she thought," I interrupted. "That I wasn't good enough to sit at the table with your important guests. That I would somehow embarrass you or diminish your social standing." "No, that's not—" "It is," I said firmly. "And it's been happening for months now. I've been gradually pushed to the periphery of your lives, good enough to provide free childcare and household help, but not good enough to be treated as family." Michael looked genuinely distraught now, his professional composure cracking. "Mom, I never meant for you to feel that way. But you've allowed it to happen. You've watched it happen without objection." I kept my voice level with effort. "And now I need you to understand something very clearly. I have cancer. I will be undergoing surgery and radiation, possibly chemotherapy. I will need support, practical and emotional. And I expect that support to come from my family." He reached across the table to grasp my hand. "Of course, anything you need. We'll rearrange schedules, hire help for the children." "That's not all." I slid the trust documents toward him. "These are the updated terms for the Cedar Heights property." Michael's expression faltered as he looked down at the papers. "What do you mean, updated terms?" "The house is mine, Michael. It always has been. I purchased it outright after your father died and established a trust allowing you and Vanessa to live there while I maintained ownership." "I know that," he said, a defensive note entering his voice. "We agreed not to tell Vanessa, to spare her pride. But what does this have to do with—" "Everything," I cut in. "It has everything to do with how I've been treated in a home that I own, how I've been gradually relegated to the role of servant rather than family member, how I've been made to eat in the kitchen while guests are entertained in the dining room that my money renovated." Michael had the grace to look ashamed. "Mom, I'm sorry about last night, truly. It won't happen again." "You're right, it won't," I agreed. "Because the new trust terms are very specific about my position in the household. I will be treated with respect and included in family activities. I will have a say in major household decisions. And if those terms aren't met, alternative arrangements will be made." "Alternative arrangements?" His legal mind immediately grasped the implication. "You'd evict us?" "I would exercise my rights as the property owner," I corrected. "But it doesn't need to come to that. All I'm asking for is basic respect, Michael, the kind that should be given freely, not coerced through legal documents." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "I never thought you'd use the house as leverage." "And I never thought I'd need to," I countered. "But here we are." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of years of unspoken grievances hovering between us. I could see the conflict in Michael's eyes, the son who loved his mother, battling with the husband who had allowed his wife to gradually push that mother aside. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally. "First, I want you to understand the seriousness of my medical situation. I have cancer, Michael. Stage 2, The treatment will be challenging, expensive, and I will need support." He nodded, the reality of my diagnosis seeming to sink in fully. "I understand. We'll be there for you, I promise. Second, I want you to be honest with Vanessa about the house. The full truth, not partial disclosures. She needs to understand that her behavior has been noticed and that it needs to change." Michael looked less certain about this point. "She'll be humiliated." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But humility might be exactly what she needs right now. And finally, I want a family meeting. You, me, Vanessa, and Diane as my advocate. We need to establish clear expectations going forward." "Diane?" Michael frowned. "Why involve her in family business?" "Because she's been more family to me these past months than my actual family," I said bluntly. "She's earned a place at the table, literally and figuratively." My son looked at me for a long moment, then down at the medical report and legal documents before him. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing options, considering consequences, the attorney's mind at work. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll talk to Vanessa tonight, and we'll have the family meeting. Tomorrow, if that works for you." I nodded, relief washing through me. It was a start. "Thank you." As we prepared to leave, Michael helping me with my coat in a gesture of consideration that had been rare lately, he asked quietly, "Are you afraid? About the cancer?" The question caught me off guard with its directness, its return to the core issue beneath all the property discussions and family dynamics. For a moment, I was simply a mother with her son, facing a frightening diagnosis. "Yes," I admitted. "I'm terrified." He pulled me into a hug then, the first real embrace we'd shared in months. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. We'll get through this together." I held on to him, allowing myself to draw strength from his solid presence. That's all I've ever wanted, for us to face things together, as a family. As we walked out of the restaurant, I felt a cautious hope beginning to take root. The road ahead would not be easy. Cancer never is, and family reconciliations rarely proceed smoothly. But I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my place in my son's life, in my grandchildren's lives, and most importantly, in my own story. The house in Cedar Heights was mine, yes. But what I truly owned, what could never be taken from me, was my dignity, my courage, and my right to be treated with respect. The family meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at my apartment. I spent the morning cleaning, though my small place hardly needed it. The modest 2-bedroom in Riverside was immaculately kept, a stark contrast to the sprawling Cedar Heights home that technically belonged to me, but where I increasingly felt like an intruder. Perhaps that was why I had come to prefer my apartment. Here, at least I was undeniably the mistress of my own domain. Diane arrived an hour early, bearing a tray of sandwiches and a pitcher of iced tea. "Thought you might need sustenance for this battle," she said, setting everything on my kitchen counter. "It's not going to be a battle," I insisted, though my trembling hands betrayed my nerves as I arranged teacups on a tray. "It's going to be a calm, rational family discussion." Diane raised an eyebrow. "You're telling Vanessa she's been living in your house for years while treating you like hired help." Calm might be optimistic. I couldn't argue with that assessment. Michael had called the previous evening to confirm he'd spoken with Vanessa about both my diagnosis and the house. His voice had been tight, carefully controlled. She was surprised, he'd said, which I took to mean she hadn't reacted well. "I just want dignity," I said to Diane now, smoothing the tablecloth for the third time. "And support through my treatment." "Is that too much to ask from family?" "Of course not," Diane said firmly. "And if they can't provide that, they don't deserve to live in your house, family or not." The doorbell rang at precisely 3 o'clock. Michael had always been punctual, a trait he'd inherited from his father. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went to answer it. Michael stood there alone, his expression strained. "Vanessa's parking the car," he explained, stepping inside and embracing me awkwardly. "She'll be up in a minute." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Already this felt wrong. Michael arriving ahead, perhaps to prepare me for whatever mood his wife was in. Acting as a buffer between us, as he had increasingly done over recent years. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been in months. "After the diagnosis, I mean." "Scared," I answered honestly, "but ready to fight. Dr. Brenner says my prognosis is good if we act quickly." Michael nodded, his eyes reflecting genuine concern. "We'll get you the best care, Mom, whatever you need." The sincerity in his voice touched me. This was the son I remembered, caring, supportive, the boy who had once rushed home from college when I'd caught pneumonia, insisting on making chicken soup from scratch using his grandmother's recipe. The moment was interrupted by another ring of the doorbell. Vanessa had arrived. I opened the door to find my daughter-in-law standing stiffly in the hallway, her expression carefully composed. She was dressed impeccably, as always, in tailored slacks and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, emphasizing her sharp cheekbones and the tension around her mouth. "Ruth," she said with a nod that was just shy of respectful. "Thank you for having us." The formality was jarring after years of family intimacy, but perhaps appropriate given the circumstances. I stepped aside to let her enter, noting how her eyes darted around my apartment, taking in the modest furnishings, the well-worn but carefully maintained furniture, the photographs of Michael and the grandchildren that covered almost every surface. "Please, sit down." I gestured toward the living room where Diane was already seated, watching Vanessa with undisguised wariness. "You remember Diane, of course." "Of course," Vanessa said, her tone neutral as she took a seat on the sofa beside Michael, maintaining a careful distance from him. "Hello, Diane." The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. I served tea, my hands steadier than I'd expected, and offered sandwiches that no one touched. When I finally sat down in my favorite armchair, the one Henry had given me for our 30th anniversary, I felt oddly calm. The worst had already happened. My son knew about my cancer, Vanessa knew about the house, and we were all here to address the situation directly. After months of silent endurance, the relief of having everything in the open was palpable. "Thank you for coming," I began, setting my teacup down carefully. "I think it's important that we discuss two significant matters: my health situation and the living arrangements at Cedar Heights." Vanessa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the mention of the house. Michael placed a hand on her knee, whether in warning or support, I couldn't tell. "First, my diagnosis," I continued. "As you now know, I have stage 2 breast cancer. My treatment will begin next week with surgery, followed by radiation and possibly chemotherapy, depending on what they find. Dr. Brenner is optimistic, but the road ahead will be challenging." "We're here for you, Mom," Michael said immediately. "Whatever you need." I looked directly at Vanessa. "I will need practical support, rides to treatments, help around the apartment, possibly assistance with meals when the side effects are at their worst. And I'll need emotional support. This isn't a journey anyone should face alone." Vanessa met my gaze steadily. "Of course we'll help. The children will want to see you too. We can arrange visits around your treatment schedule." Her response was perfect on the surface, saying all the right things, but there was a coolness beneath that concerned me. Still, it was a start. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "That means a great deal to me." Diane shifted in her seat. "And how will you balance Ruth's needs with your work schedule, Vanessa? I understand you're quite busy with your real estate career." The question was pointed, referencing the many times Vanessa had used work as an excuse to drop the children with me unexpectedly, or cancel family plans at the last minute. Vanessa's smile tightened. I'm sure we can work something out. Family comes first after all. Does it? Diane pressed, ignoring my warning glance. Because from what Ruth has told me. Let's move on to the second matter, I interrupted, not wanting the discussion to devolve into accusations before we'd even address the central issue. The house at Cedar Heights, the atmosphere in... The room shifted immediately. Vanessa sat up straighter, her posture defensive. Michael looked uncomfortable, his gaze fixed on the floor. As Michael has now explained to you, Vanessa, I purchased the Cedar Heights property outright after Henry died. I established a trust that allows you both to live there while I maintain ownership. The trust covers major repairs and improvements, while you pay the taxes and utilities. Yes, Michael explained, Vanessa said, her voice tight. What he couldn't explain was why this arrangement was kept secret from me for 5 years. I sighed. That was a mutual decision between Michael and myself. He felt, it was my idea, Michael interjected, looking directly at his wife. I was embarrassed that we needed Mom's help to afford the house we wanted. I asked her to keep the arrangement quiet. Vanessa's expression flickered with hurt before hardening again. So you both decided I couldn't handle the truth, that I was too proud or too shallow to accept help graciously. That wasn't it at all, I tried to explain. We wanted you to feel that Cedar Heights was truly your home, not a gift you hadn't earned. And now you're using it as leverage, Vanessa said bluntly, threatening to take it away if we don't meet your expectations. I flinched at the characterization. I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply clarifying the terms of an arrangement that has become unbalanced. Unbalanced how exactly? Vanessa's tone was dangerously calm. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been dreading, laying out explicitly how I'd been made to feel in recent months. But Diane's steady presence gave me courage. Over the past year or so, I've been increasingly marginalized in your home and in your lives, I began carefully. I've been asked to eat in the kitchen while you entertain guests in the dining room. I've been called upon for childcare with little notice or consideration for my plans. I've been introduced to your colleagues as Michael's mother who helps with the children, rather than as family. Vanessa opened her mouth to object, but I held up a hand. Please, let me finish. I've accepted these slights because I love you and the children. But now, facing cancer, I need to prioritize my well-being. And that includes being treated with respect and dignity by my family. So this is punishment, Vanessa said, her voice rising slightly. Because you felt slighted, you're threatening our home. No one is threatening anything, Michael interrupted, his tone firmer than I'd heard him use with his wife in years. Mom is asking to be treated with the respect she deserves. As the woman who raised me, as the grandmother of our children, and yes, as the owner of the house we live in. Vanessa turned to him, clearly surprised by his stance. And you agree with this ultimatum? It's not an ultimatum, I clarified. It's a request for mutual respect going forward. The updated trust documents simply formalize what should have been happening all along. Diane reached over to squeeze my hand supportively. Ruth has been extraordinarily generous with you both. All she's asking in return is to be treated as a valued family member, not an occasional convenience. Vanessa flinched at Diane's blunt assessment. For a moment, she looked genuinely hurt, and I caught a glimpse of vulnerability beneath her polished exterior. It reminded me of the younger woman who had once sought my advice about making Michael's favorite meals, who had called me in tears when Emma was born, overwhelmed by new motherhood. I never meant to make you feel unwelcome, she said finally, her voice softer. I was trying to build our own life, to establish our home as ours. I didn't realize that the home wasn't actually yours, Diane supplied unhelpfully. Diane, I warned. Vanessa straightened her shoulders. Fine, you own the house. You've made your point. What exactly do you want from us now? The directness of the question caught me off guard. What did I want? I'd been so focused on addressing the problems that I hadn't fully articulated my vision for a solution. I want to be treated as family, not as an inconvenience, I said after a moment. I want to be included in family gatherings, not relegated to the kitchen or called upon only when you need childcare. I want acknowledgement of my role in providing the home you live in. And most importantly right now, I want support through my cancer treatment. Not begrudging obligation, but genuine care. Michael nodded, his expression serious. Those are more than reasonable requests, Mom. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her hands folded tightly in her lap. When she finally looked up, her expression was complex. Anger mingled with shame, pride wrestling with pragmatism. I understand, she said carefully. And I apologize for how things have been. I never intended to make you feel undervalued. The apology seemed genuine, if somewhat measured, but a lifetime of reading people, first as a teacher, then as a parent, told me there was more she wasn't saying. But, I prompted gently. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. But it's humiliating to discover the life I thought we were building. The home I've been so proud of was never really ours at all. That I've been living in someone else's house while thinking it was mine. That my professional success selling. Real estate doesn't actually extend to owning my own home. And there it was, the heart of her resistance. Pride. The same pride that had led Michael to ask me to keep the arrangement secret in the first place. The same pride that had perhaps driven Vanessa to push me to the periphery as her own status had risen. The house was always meant as a gift, not a source of shame, I explained gently. A way to provide security for my son and grandchildren. There's no dishonor in accepting help from family. It doesn't feel like help anymore, Vanessa said quietly. It feels like control. The accusation stung, partly because there was a grain of truth in it. I hadn't set out to control them, but the updated trust terms were, in essence, an attempt to regulate their behavior toward me. That was never my intention, I said, but I understand why it might feel that way now. I paused, considering my next words carefully. Perhaps we need a fresh start, a clean slate. What do you mean? Michael asked. I mean that we acknowledge what's happened, learn from it, and move forward differently, I explained. You know about my diagnosis now, and you know about the house. No more secrets, no more pretense. Just honesty about what we need from each other. And the trust terms? Vanessa asked, still wary. They stand, I said firmly. But I hope they'll become irrelevant because we'll be treating each other with natural respect and consideration, not because legal documents require it. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this. Michael was the first to speak. I think that's fair, he said, looking between his wife and me. No more secrets, no more taking Mom for granted, and full support through her treatment. Vanessa nodded slowly. I can agree to that. She hesitated, then added, and I am genuinely sorry about your diagnosis, Ruth. Cancer is terrifying. No one should face that without support. Her words seemed sincere, and I felt the first real hope that we might find our way back to a genuine family relationship. Thank you, I said simply. Diane, who had been watching the exchange with barely concealed skepticism, finally spoke up. Well, that all sounds very promising, but words are easy. Actions matter more. Diane, I admonished gently. No, she's right, Vanessa surprised me by saying. I understand why you'd be doubtful, given recent history. I can only demonstrate through actions going forward that I mean what I say. It was perhaps the most mature thing I'd heard from my daughter-in-law in years. I nodded gratefully. appreciating her willingness to acknowledge the trust deficit without becoming defensive. The conversation gradually shifted to more practical matters: my treatment schedule, arrangements for childcare during my recovery, how we would explain my illness to Emma and Jake in age-appropriate ways. Throughout the discussion, I noticed subtle changes in how Michael and Vanessa interacted with me. Michael was more attentive, more like his former self. Vanessa was more thoughtful, asking questions about my preferences rather than making assumptions. By the time they prepared to leave 2 hours later, we had a tentative plan in place. Michael would drive me to my surgery next week, and Vanessa would coordinate a meal schedule with some of my friends from church. The children would visit regularly, but on a schedule that accommodated my energy levels. And most surprisingly, Vanessa suggested I might want to stay at Cedar Heights during the most intense part of my recovery. The guest room on the main floor would be perfect, she said. No stairs to navigate, and we'd all be there to help. The offer was unexpected but welcome. I'd like that, I said, genuinely touched. Thank you. As they were putting on their coats, Vanessa hesitated, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There's something else I should tell you, she said, about why things changed between us. Michael looked surprised, as if this wasn't something they'd discussed. What is it? I asked, curious despite my wariness. Vanessa took a deep breath. About 1.5 years ago, I overheard something at a dinner party. One of Michael's colleagues' wives made a comment about how we couldn't possibly afford our home on our salaries. She implied that we must have family money backing us. I frowned, not understanding the connection. And that bothered you? It wasn't just that, Vanessa continued. She specifically said that everyone knew Michael Wilson wasn't successful enough as an attorney to afford Cedar Heights, and that I must have married him for his family's money. Her voice tightened. She laughed about it with the other women, not realizing I was in the powder room with the door ajar. Michael looked stunned. You never told me this. What was I supposed to say? That your colleagues' wives were mocking us behind our backs? That they didn't respect your career accomplishments? Vanessa shook her head. After that night, I became obsessed with proving that we deserved our life, that we'd earned it. I pushed for more prestigious social connections, took on higher-end real estate listings, insisted on entertaining the right people, and gradually pushed me away, I thought, as the pieces fell into place. The change in Vanessa's attitude toward me had roughly coincided with her increased social ambitions. In her mind, perhaps, I represented the truth she was trying to hide, that they hadn't achieved their lifestyle entirely on their own. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said sincerely, but shutting me out wasn't the answer. I know that now, Vanessa admitted. I was ashamed, and afraid that having Michael's mother around too often would reinforce the impression that we needed help. It was prideful and wrong. The admission couldn't erase the hurt of recent months, but it helped me understand Vanessa's behavior hadn't been purely about disrespect for me. It had been driven by her own insecurities, her desperate desire to be seen as successful and independent. Thank you for telling me, I said. It helps me understand. After they left, Diane stayed to help clean up, her expression thoughtful as she gathered teacups. Well, that was unexpected, she said finally. Vanessa actually seemed human. I smiled despite myself. She's always been human, Diane. Just flawed like the rest of us. Her flaws have been causing you a lot of pain, Diane reminded me. Do you think anything will really change? I considered the question seriously. I think so. The truth has a way of clearing the air, even when it's uncomfortable. And my diagnosis. Sometimes it takes a serious health scare to remind people what really matters. Diane didn't look entirely convinced. Just don't let them off too easily. You deserve better than how they've been treating you, cancer or no cancer, house or no house." "I know," I assured her. "But I'd rather rebuild bridges than burn them. They're still my family." Later that evening, as I sat alone in my apartment reviewing the information packets Dr. Brenner had given me about my upcoming surgery, my phone chimed with a text message from Vanessa. "I've been thinking about what you said. You're right that actions matter more than words. Emma and Jake would like to have dinner with their grandmother tomorrow night, at the dining room table where family belongs. Would 6 p.m. work for you?" I stared at the message, a lump forming in my throat. It was a small gesture, perhaps, but a meaningful one. A concrete acknowledgement of my place in the family, freely offered rather than legally mandated. I texted back a simple, "I'd love that," and set the phone aside, feeling cautiously hopeful, for the first time in months. The next evening, I arrived at Cedar Heights precisely at 6, my heart beating a little faster than usual. Despite the tentative reconciliation of our family meeting, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Old patterns die hard, and I'd grown accustomed to disappointment when it came to my place in Michael and Vanessa's home. Jake opened the door before I could ring the bell, his 7-year-old face alight with excitement. "Grandma, Mom said you're staying for dinner and it's going to be all your favorites." I bent to hug him, breathing in the familiar scent of boy, a mixture of outdoors and the strawberry shampoo Vanessa insisted on. "Is that so? And what are my favorites according to your mom?" "Pot roast with those squishy carrots and apple. Crisp for dessert," he reported confidently. "And Emma and I helped." "They certainly did." Michael appeared in the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Emma peeled all the apples, and Jake set the table. He leaned in to kiss my cheek. All by himself, very precisely. He wanted everything to be perfect for you. The significance of this wasn't lost on me. Jake setting the table meant there was a place for me at it, not just permitted to join, but expected and prepared for. "Well, I'm honored," I told Jake seriously, allowing him to take my hand and lead me through to the dining room. The sight that greeted me made my breath catch. The table was indeed set beautifully, with the good china I'd given them as a housewarming gift years ago. Fresh flowers centered the table, and candles waited to be lit. But what truly touched me was the seating arrangement. At the head of the table, where Vanessa usually presided, was a place card in Emma's careful handwriting. "Grandma Ruth." "We thought you should sit at the head of the table tonight," Emma said, appearing from the kitchen with a shy smile. "At 10?" She was already showing signs of the beautiful woman she would become, with her father's thoughtful eyes and her mother's elegant features. "Since it's your special dinner." "That's very thoughtful, sweetheart," I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. Vanessa emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming dish, her expression a touch uncertain as she assessed my reaction to their preparations. "I hope pot roast is still your favorite. I used the recipe you gave me when Michael and I first got married." "It is," I confirmed, amazed that she'd remembered. It had been years since she'd asked me for recipes or cooking advice, gradually replacing my simple, homey dishes with more sophisticated fare as her social aspirations grew. "Good," she smiled, and for once it reached her eyes. "Jake, would you bring in the rolls, please? Emma, help your father with the gravy." As the children scurried to help, Vanessa set down the pot roast and hesitated beside me. "I want to apologize again, Ruth. Properly this time, without excuses or explanations. What I did, making you eat in the kitchen, treating you as less than family, was wrong. Deeply wrong." The directness of her apology surprised me. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a great deal." "We've prepared a room for you downstairs for after your surgery," she continued. "Emma's already picked out books she wants to read to you while you recover, and Jake has a very ambitious plan involving daily nature collections he can bring in to cheer you up. I smiled at the thought of Jake's idea of cheering gifts, probably an assortment of interesting rocks, unusual leaves, and possibly the occasional unfortunate insect. That sounds wonderful. Dinner was strangely comfortable, more so than any family meal in recent memory. The children chattered about school and friends, Michael discussed an interesting case he was working on, and Vanessa asked genuine questions about my upcoming treatment. No one checked phones or rushed through the meal. When Emma asked if I was scared about the surgery, Vanessa didn't hush her or change the subject as she might have once done. I am scared, I admitted honestly, but also hopeful, and having all of you with me makes me feel stronger. We'll be right there, Michael promised. Every step of the way. And we can help with practical stuff too, Emma said earnestly. I can bring you tea and books and stuff, and Jake can be quiet when you need to rest. I can be super quiet, Jake agreed, at a volume that suggested this might be aspirational rather than actual. I laughed, feeling a warmth that had been missing for too long. I'll be counting on all of you. After dessert, when the children had been sent to get ready for bed, the three of us adults sat in the living room with coffee. The conversation turned, inevitably, to the house. I've been thinking, Vanessa said carefully, about the Cedar Heights property. It doesn't seem right that you're living in that small apartment while we're here in this beautiful home that you provided. The apartment suits me, I replied honestly. It's manageable, close to my friends, and has good memories. Henry and I lived there when we were first married, before Michael was born. I didn't know that. Michael looked surprised. You never mentioned it when you moved back there after Dad died. Some things are too precious to talk about casually, I said simply. That apartment was where we became a family. It felt right to return there when I was alone again. Vanessa and Michael exchanged a glance I couldn't quite interpret. Still, Vanessa continued, during your treatment and recovery, you should be here with us. The guest suite has its own bathroom, and we can arrange for a hospital bed if the regular one becomes uncomfortable. That's very generous, I said, touched by the offer. It's not generosity, Vanessa corrected gently. It's family, and it's the least we can do, given everything you've done for us. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Whatever epiphany our confrontation had triggered, it seemed genuine. People can change, I reminded myself. Sometimes they just need a stark reminder of what truly matters. As Michael drove me home later that evening, he was uncharacteristically quiet, deep in thought. Just before we reached my apartment building, he pulled the car to the curb and turned to face me. I let you down, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I watched Vanessa push you aside, and I did nothing to stop it. Worse, I participated in it. Michael, no, please let me say this, he interrupted. I've been thinking about it constantly since our lunch, trying to understand how I became someone who would let his mother eat alone in the kitchen while he entertained guests. And I think I was so focused on building this perfect life with Vanessa, on being successful in her eyes, that I lost sight of the values you and Dad raised me with. The raw honesty of his self-assessment moved me deeply. We all lose our way sometimes, I said gently. The important thing is finding our way back. I want to be worthy of the sacrifices you've made for me, he said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I want to be the man Dad would have been proud of. Your father would have understood, I assured him, reaching over to squeeze his hand. He knew better than anyone how easy it is to become caught up in appearances, in worldly definitions of success. Why do you think he insisted on those camping trips every summer? To remind you what really matters. Michael smiled at the memory. The great perspective adjustment, he called them. No phones, no computers, just family and nature. And scorched, Hot dogs and mosquito bites, I added, smiling back. But he was right. It did adjust our perspective. I think I'm in need of another adjustment, Michael admitted. Cancer has a way of clarifying priorities, doesn't it? I nodded, suddenly tired beyond words. The emotional upheaval of recent days, combined with the looming surgery, was taking its toll. It certainly does. Michael noticed my fatigue immediately. I'm keeping you up when you need rest. Let's get you home. As he walked me to my door, he hesitated, then pulled me into a tight hug. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I haven't shown it very well lately. I love you too, I murmured against his shoulder. Always have, always will. Sleep came easily that night, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The confrontation I'd been dreading had led not to further estrangement, but to the beginnings of reconciliation. The truth about the house was finally in the open. My cancer would be treated with the support of my family around me. For the first time in months, I felt hope, not just for my health, but for the restoration of the family bonds that had been slowly eroding. Morning brought a text from Vanessa. Appointment made with Home Health Aid Service to discuss post-surgical care. Also found a cleaning service that specializes in helping cancer patients. We'll bring information when we pick you up for pre-op appointment tomorrow. The message was practical rather than emotional, but it represented something significant. Vanessa taking initiative to support me, making concrete plans rather than vague promises. It was a beginning. I texted back my thanks, then called Diane to update her on the surprising developments of the past 24 hours. So, they've seen the light, she said, sounding both pleased and slightly skeptical. Just like that? Not just like that, I corrected. It took a cancer diagnosis and the revelation about the house to break through. But yes, I think genuine change is happening. I hope you're right, Diane said. You deserve a family that treasures you, especially now. It's more complicated than treasuring or not treasuring, I reflected. We all got caught up in appearances, in unspoken expectations, me included. You? Diane sounded doubtful. How are you at fault? I considered this carefully. I allowed things to deteriorate without speaking up. I kept secrets that should have been discussed openly. I enabled behavior that should have been confronted. Out of love, Diane protested. Yes, but not always wise love, I admitted. Sometimes love needs to be fierce as well as gentle. Sometimes truth is the greatest kindness, even when it's uncomfortable. Diane was quiet for a moment. Henry would be proud of you, she said finally. For fighting, for your health, and for your place in your family. The mention of Henry brought a familiar ache, but also warmth. How I wished he were here beside me, facing this battle together. But in a way, his influence lived on in the courage I'd found to stand up for myself, to demand the respect I deserved. I think he would, I agreed softly. And that matters to me more than I can say. Surgery day arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. Michael picked me up before dawn, arriving at my apartment with a thermos of tea and a quiet determination that reminded me powerfully of his father. The drive to Mapleton Memorial Hospital was largely silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts about what lay ahead. Nervous? Michael asked as we pulled into the parking garage. Terrified, I admitted. There seemed little point in pretending otherwise. But ready. He reached over to squeeze my hand. I'll be right here when you wake up, and so will Vanessa. She's dropping the kids at school and then coming straight here. This surprised me. I'd expected Michael's presence, of course, but not necessarily Vanessa's. Despite the recent improvement in our relationship, taking a day off work to sit in a hospital waiting room seemed beyond what I would have anticipated from my daughter-in-law. She doesn't need to do that, I said. Her schedule is always so full. She rescheduled everything, Michael said simply. This is more important. The preoperative procedures passed in a blur of forms, questions, and reassurances from the surgical team. Dr. Howell, my breast surgeon, stopped by for a final review of what would happen. We'll remove the tumor and surrounding tissue, as well as sample the sentinel lymph nodes to check if the cancer has spread. You're in good hands, Mrs. Wilson. I know, I said, trying to smile despite my fear. Thank you. As they prepared to wheel me to the operating room, Michael leaned down to kiss my forehead. We'll be waiting, Mom. And we've got everything arranged at the house for your recovery. The anesthesiologist approached, smiling kindly. Ready for a little nap, Mrs. Wilson? I looked up at my son, drawing strength from his steady presence. Ready, I confirmed. As the medication began flowing into my IV, my last conscious thought was of Henry and how proud he would be of the man our son had become, despite his missteps along the way. Waking came slowly, consciousness returning in fragments. First, awareness of discomfort, a dull pain in my chest, a dryness in my throat. Then sounds, the steady beeping of monitors, hushed voices nearby. Finally, sight, the blurry outlines of the recovery room gradually sharpening into focus. She's waking up, a voice said, Michael's voice tense with concern. A nurse appeared in my field of vision. Hello there, Mrs. Wilson. Surgery went well. You're in recovery now. I tried to speak but found my throat too dry. The nurse offered ice chips, which felt like heaven against my parched lips. The doctor will be by soon to talk with you, she explained, adjusting something on my IV. Your family is here. Would you like to see them? I nodded, and moments later, Michael was beside me, his face showing relief mixed with lingering worry. And beside him, somewhat to my surprise, stood Vanessa, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged, as if she'd been wiping away tears. Mom, Michael said softly. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, I managed, my voice raspy. But alive. Vanessa stepped closer, hesitantly taking my hand. You gave us quite a scare. The surgery took longer than they expected. Dr. Howell will explain everything, Michael added quickly. But she said it went well. They got the whole tumor. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing relief to wash over me. The first hurdle had been cleared. There would be more to come. Recovery, radiation, possibly chemotherapy, depending on what the pathology showed. But this critical first step was behind me. The children made you these, Vanessa said, placing several handmade cards on my bedside table. They wanted to come, but we thought it might be too much for them to see you like this. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the decision. Jake and Emma would have been upset seeing their grandmother attached to monitors and IV lines. That was wise. Dr. Howell arrived then, clipboard in hand, her surgical cap replaced by a neat bob that framed her serious face. Mrs. Wilson, good to see you awake. The surgery went as planned. We removed the tumor and a margin of healthy tissue around it, along with 3 sentinel lymph nodes. And? I asked, finding it difficult to read her professional expression. The tumor was exactly where we expected, approximately the size we anticipated from the imaging. We won't know about clear margins or lymph node involvement until the pathology comes back, which should be in about 3 to 5 days. But visually, everything looked good. More waiting, more uncertainty. But for now, at least, there was room for cautious optimism. When can I go home? I asked, already uncomfortable with the hospital environment. Dr. Howell smiled slightly. Eager to escape us already? We'll keep you overnight for observation, but if all goes well, you should be discharged tomorrow afternoon. You'll need someone with you for the first few days at least. She'll be staying with us, Vanessa said without hesitation. We've prepared everything. Dr. Howell looked pleased. Excellent. Family support makes a tremendous difference in recovery outcomes. She turned back to me. Rest now, Mrs. Wilson. The next 24 hours are about managing pain and beginning the healing process. After she left, Michael pulled a chair closer to my bed. I'll stay tonight, he said. Vanessa will go home to be with the kids and we'll all come pick you up tomorrow. Vanessa nodded. I've already arranged to work from home for the rest of the week. The guest room is ready, and we've stocked up on everything the discharge nurse suggested we might need. Their coordinated planning, their shared commitment to my care, it was more than I had dared to hope for just weeks ago. Something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic, triggered by my diagnosis and the revelation about the house, but evolving now into something that felt genuine rather than obligatory. Thank you both, I said, fighting to keep my eyes open as fatigue washed over me. For everything. Rest, Mom, Michael said gently. We'll be here when you wake up. The next day passed in a blur of discharge instructions, prescriptions, and careful preparations for the journey to Cedar Heights. By the time we arrived at the house, I was exhausted beyond words, pain medication making my thoughts fuzzy around the edges. Vanessa had indeed prepared thoroughly. The guest suite was arranged with hospital precision, complete with extra pillows to help me position comfortably, a bedside table with everything I might need within easy reach, and even a small refrigerator stocked with water and nutritious snacks. The home health nurse will come tomorrow morning, Vanessa explained as she helped me settle into bed. She'll change your dressings and make sure everything's healing properly. And I've set up a meal train with some of the neighbors and your church friends. They'll be bringing dinners for the next 2 weeks. I was too tired to fully process everything, managing only a grateful nod before sleep claimed me again. The next few days established a new routine. Mornings began with a visit from the home health nurse, who checked my surgical site and adjusted my medications as needed. Afternoons often found Emma reading to me from her favorite books, while Jake would proudly present his Healing Rocks collection, ordinary pebbles he'd gathered from the garden, but was convinced contained special powers. Vanessa coordinated everything with surprising efficiency, from medication schedules to well-wishers who called or visited. Michael, though occupied with work during the day, spent every evening beside my bed, sometimes working quietly on his laptop, sometimes simply talking with me about inconsequential things, a welcome distraction from the looming question of what the pathology report would reveal. On the 5th day after surgery, Dr. Howell called while the whole family was having an early dinner in my room, a picnic-style meal Vanessa had arranged on a folding table. Michael answered, his expression growing serious as he listened. Handed me the phone with a reassuring squeeze of my shoulder. Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Howell's voice was professional but warm. I have your pathology results. I took a deep breath, acutely aware of my family watching anxiously. Go ahead, doctor. Good news. The margins around the tumor were clear, meaning we got all the cancer cells in that area. Of the 3 lymph nodes we sampled, 2 were completely clear. The third showed what we call micrometastasis, a very small amount of cancer cells. My heart sank at those last words. What does that mean? It means we'll recommend a course of radiation therapy, followed by hormone therapy since your cancer is estrogen receptor positive. The micrometastasis is concerning but minimal. I still consider your prognosis quite good. Relief flooded through me, though tempered with the reality that my journey was far from over. Thank you, doctor. After ending the call, I relayed the information to my family, watching their faces reflect my own complicated mix of relief and continued concern. So what happens next? Emma asked, her young face serious beyond her years. Next, I do radiation. Therapy, I explained, trying to keep my tone matter-of-fact for the children's sake. It's like special X-rays that kill any cancer cells that might still be hiding. Does it hurt? Jake's small hand found mine, his eyes wide. Not during the treatment, I assured him, though I knew from my research that the cumulative effects could be challenging. I might get tired afterward, like when you play too hard at the park. We can help when you're tired, Emma said with the confidence of a 10-year-old. We're really good helpers. The best helpers, I agreed, fighting back tears at their earnest concern. Vanessa stepped in smoothly. Why don't you two help Dad with the dishes while Grandma rests a bit? It's been an exciting afternoon. Once the children had left with Michael, Vanessa sat on the edge of my bed, her expression more vulnerable than I was accustomed to seeing. Radiation therapy is usually 5 days a week for about 6 weeks, she said. It wasn't a question. She'd clearly been researching. You'll need rides every day, and the fatigue can be cumulative. I nodded, somewhat surprised by her knowledge. That's right. I was thinking I might look into medical transport services once I'm a bit stronger. Vanessa shook her head firmly. That won't be necessary. We'll handle your transportation. Michael and I have already discussed it. I can arrange my showings around your appointments, and he can adjust his court schedule. Between the two of us, we'll make it work. The offer was generous, far beyond what I would have expected even with our improved relationship. That's a tremendous commitment, Vanessa. Your career will still be there, she interrupted. This is more important. I studied her face, trying to reconcile this woman with the one who had banished me to the kitchen just weeks ago. The change seemed almost too dramatic to be genuine. And yet, there was no denying the sincerity in her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. May I ask you something? I said carefully. Of course. Why the change? And please don't say it's just because of my diagnosis or the house revelation. Those were catalysts, certainly, but this... I gestured around at the carefully prepared room, the thoughtful arrangements. This feels like something more. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, smoothing an invisible wrinkle on the bedspread. When Michael told me about the house, she began slowly, my first reaction was humiliation. Then anger. I felt deceived, manipulated. I nodded, having expected as much. But then he told me about your diagnosis, and suddenly everything else seemed trivial. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. It made me realize how skewed my priorities had become. I've been so focused on appearances, on what other people think, that I lost sight of what actually matters. Success matters, I acknowledged. Building a career you're proud of isn't trivial. No, but treating family as inconvenient when they don't fit my social agenda? She shook her head. That's not the person I want to be. Not the example. I want to set for Emma and Jake. Her words echoed my own thoughts from those painful days of being gradually sidelined in their lives. The mention of the children particularly resonated. I had often wondered what lessons they were absorbing from watching their mother's treatment of their grandmother. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Vanessa continued, about the kind of life we're building, the values we're demonstrating, and I didn't like what I saw. She took a deep breath. My own parents were very focused on status, on outward appearances. Love was conditional on achievement, on maintaining the right image. I swore I'd never parent that way, but somehow I've been recreating exactly that environment. This glimpse into Vanessa's background was illuminating. She rarely spoke about her childhood or her relationship with her parents, who lived in California and visited infrequently. You have 2 wonderful children who adore you, I said gently. You haven't repeated your parents' mistakes. But I was heading down that path, she insisted. Prioritizing what the Robertsons might think over treating you with basic dignity. That's exactly the kind of thing my mother would do. I didn't argue the point, sensing that this self-reflection was important for her. When I imagined Emma someday treating me the way I've been treating you, Vanessa continued, her voice catching slightly, it broke my heart, and I realized that's exactly what I've been doing to you. Family relationships are complicated, I said, feeling an unexpected surge of compassion for the younger woman. We all make mistakes. Yes, But some mistakes cause deep hurt. Vanessa reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. I am truly sorry, Ruth. Not just because of the house, not just because you're ill, but because what I did was wrong. Period. The unequivocal apology, free from excuses or justifications, felt like a gift. Thank you, I said simply. That means a great deal to me. I want to do better, she continued. Be better. For the children, for Michael, for you, and honestly, for myself too. The person I've been lately isn't someone I'm proud of. Well, I said, squeezing her hand gently. It seems we both have healing to do. Different kinds, perhaps, but healing nonetheless. Vanessa smiled, a genuine expression that softened her features beautifully. I think you're right, and maybe we can help each other with that. The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Over the next few weeks, as I gradually recovered from surgery and began preparing for radiation treatments, Vanessa proved true to her word. She rearranged her work schedule around my medical appointments, researched nutrition, plans beneficial for cancer patients, and most significantly, included me fully in family life without hesitation or apparent resentment. One evening, about 3 weeks after my surgery, I was feeling well enough to join the family for dinner in the dining room. As Michael helped me to my seat, not at the head of the table this time, but in my regular place beside Emma, I noticed an envelope propped against my water glass. "What's this?" I asked, picking it up curiously. Michael and Vanessa exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Open it," Michael encouraged. "It's something we've been working on." Inside was a legal document, formal in its language but clear in its intent. Michael, with his attorney's precision, had drafted a new arrangement for the Cedar Heights property. Rather than the trust maintaining sole ownership with Michael and Vanessa as beneficiaries, the document proposed a joint ownership structure. The house would belong equally to all three of us, with provisions ensuring it would eventually pass to Emma and Jake. "We don't want to live in your house anymore," Vanessa explained, seeing my confusion. "We want to live in our house, yours, mine, and Michael's together." "It's not about the financial value," Michael added quickly. "It's about recognition, acknowledgement, equality." The gesture touched me deeply. It wasn't about the legal technicalities. I had never intended to exercise my ownership rights as leverage, recent events notwithstanding. It was about what the change represented. A family united, each member valued, each contribution recognized. "This is very thoughtful," I said, genuinely moved. "But are you sure? The original arrangement was meant to provide security for you and the children." "And it did," Michael acknowledged. "But it also created an imbalance that allowed me, to take you for granted. This feels more right." I looked between them, seeing the sincerity in both their expressions. Then I would be honored to share ownership of this beautiful home with you both. Jake, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly piped up. "Does this mean Grandma is moving in forever?" The innocent question brought laughter from all of us, breaking the emotional moment. "Not forever, buddy," Michael explained. "Grandma has her own apartment that she loves, but she'll be staying with us through her treatments, and she'll always be welcome here anytime." "Always," Vanessa emphasized, meeting my eyes with a warmth that still surprised me when directed my way. "This is her home too." "Our home," I corrected gently. Later that evening, as Michael helped me back to the guest suite that had become my temporary domain, he lingered after ensuring I had everything I needed for the night. "What did you think of our proposal?" he asked, settling into the armchair beside my bed. "Really?" I considered the question seriously. "I think it's a beautiful gesture symbolically. Practically speaking, the house was always meant for you and your family anyway." "It's more than symbolic to us," Michael insisted. "It's about setting things right. creating the foundation for a healthier family dynamic going forward. Then I think it's wonderful, I said sincerely. And I'm touched beyond words. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. There's something else I've been meaning to talk to you about. Something Vanessa and I have been discussing. His serious tone made me curious. What is it? We've been thinking about the future. Your radiation treatments will be intensive, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And after that, you'll still need regular checkups, possible additional treatments depending on how things progress. I'm aware, I said, wondering where this was heading. Your apartment is on the other side of town. Even with both of us coordinating schedules, the transportation logistics will be challenging. And that's not even considering the days when you might not feel well enough to be alone. I began to see what he was suggesting. Michael, I'm not giving up my independence because of cancer. That apartment is my home. I know, he said quickly, and we respect that. But what about a compromise? He leaned forward, his expression earnest. There's the garden apartment above the garage. It has its own entrance, its own small kitchen. It was intended as an in-law suite eventually, though we've just been using it for storage. The suggestion caught me by surprise. The garage apartment was spacious and well-designed. I'd seen the plans when the house was built, but had never actually been inside the finished space. It would give you privacy and independence, Michael continued, but keep you close enough that we could easily help when needed. The kids could visit without it being a major excursion, and after your treatments are complete, you could decide whether to stay or return to your apartment. I hesitated, torn between practical considerations and emotional attachments. My apartment held precious memories of my early days with Henry, but it was also a third-floor walk-up that would become increasingly problematic as I aged, cancer aside. You don't have to decide right now, Michael said, seeing my indecision. Just think about it. We, Vanessa and I both, would feel better knowing you were close by, especially during treatment. I'll consider it, I promised. It's a generous offer. After he left, I lay awake thinking about how dramatically my life had changed in just a few short weeks. From eating alone in the kitchen, feeling marginalized and undervalued, to being offered a place within the family home, a place of honor and respect. From facing cancer alone to having a support system that surpassed anything I could have imagined. The cynical part of me wondered if it would last. Was this transformation in Vanessa genuine and sustainable, or merely a reaction to the dual shocks of my diagnosis and the house revelation? Would old patterns eventually reassert themselves once the crisis had passed? But my heart, which had known both profound love and bitter disappointment over my 64 years, told me to trust. What I was seeing, people could change when confronted with their own behavior in stark terms. Priorities could shift when mortality entered the equation. Relationships could heal with honesty and effort on both sides. The next morning, I woke to the sound of childish giggles outside my door. After calling a welcome, Emma and Jake tumbled in, both carrying handmade gifts. "We made you something to take to your first radiation appointment," Emma announced, presenting a carefully painted rock with the words, "Grandma's Strength Stone," written in her neat handwriting. "And I made you a special bracelet," Jake added, offering a somewhat lopsided creation of yarn and beads. "The blue beads are for bravery, and the green ones are for getting better." I gathered them both close, these precious grandchildren who saw the world with such open hearts. "These are the most wonderful gifts I could imagine," I told them seriously. "They'll help me be brave and strong." Over their shoulders, I saw Vanessa watching from the doorway, her expression soft with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Pride, perhaps, or gratitude that her children could express such uncomplicated of. "Breakfast is ready when you're up to it," she said. "No rush." And I thought after the children leave for school, we could look at the garage apartment together? Michael mentioned he talked to you about it last night. The tentative way she phrased it, careful not to pressure, further convinced me that the changes in her approach were genuine. "I'd like that," I agreed. Later that morning, Vanessa led me through the garage and up the exterior stairs to the apartment above. Opening the door, she stepped aside to let me enter first. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. Far from the storage space Michael had described, the apartment had been partially furnished with several pieces I recognized instantly. The reading chair from my living room, the small writing desk that had been Henry's, the quilt my mother had made for our wedding. "Michael brought some things over last night," Vanessa explained, watching my reaction carefully. "Just to give you an idea of how it could look. Of course, you'd arrange everything exactly as you want it." I moved slowly through the space, touching familiar objects now arranged in a new setting. The apartment was lovely, bright, open, with large windows overlooking the garden. It had been designed thoughtfully, with wide doorways that would accommodate mobility aids if ever needed, a step-in shower with grab bars, and other subtle features that acknowledged the realities of aging without sacrificing aesthetics. "What do you think?" Vanessa asked after I'd completed my tour. "Could you see yourself comfortable here?" I considered the question, trying to separate practical considerations from emotional reactions. The apartment was ideal in many ways. Close to family but independent, accessible but not institutional, beautifully finished but practical for my needs. "It's wonderful," I acknowledged, "but I don't want to impose—" "You wouldn't be," Vanessa interrupted firmly. "Ruth, we want you here, not out of obligation or guilt, but because you're family, because Emma and Jake deserve to have their grandmother in their daily lives, not just on scheduled visits. Because Michael and I both value your presence." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "And selfishly, because I've discovered I like the person I am when you're around more often. You bring out something better in this family, in me." The admission, offered with such honesty, touched me deeply. "Thank you for saying that." "It's just the truth," Vanessa shrugged slightly. "So, will you consider it? No pressure for an immediate decision." I looked around the apartment again, imagining myself living there. Morning coffee watching the garden come alive. Evenings with the grandchildren dropping by after dinner. Family gatherings where I could participate fully but still retreat to my own space when needed. "I'll do more than consider it," I said finally. "I think it's the perfect solution, at least during my treatment. After that, we can reassess." The smile that spread across Vanessa's face was genuine and warm. "Wonderful. The children will be thrilled, and so are we." As we made our way back to the main house, I found myself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had led to this moment. How a painful exclusion, being made to eat in the kitchen while the family dined elsewhere, had triggered a series of revelations and confrontations that ultimately strengthened rather than destroyed our family bonds. Cancer was still a formidable opponent ahead, with treatments and uncertainties that would test us all. But I would face it surrounded by family who valued me, in a home where I was welcome, with my dignity intact and my heart full. Sometimes, it seemed the greatest gifts came wrapped in the most painful packages. And sometimes, speaking your truth, even when it hurt, even when it risked relationships you cherished, was the only way to find your way home. The move into the garage apartment happened gradually over the next 2 weeks as my strength slowly returned after surgery. Diane was skeptical at first, concerned that I was setting myself up for more disappointment by becoming more dependent on Michael and Vanessa. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, helping me pack books from my apartment bookshelves. "Living on their property gives them a lot of power in the relationship. What if things go back to how they were before?" I carefully wrapped a framed photograph of Henry and placed it in a box. "I don't think they will. Something fundamental has changed, Diane. I can feel it." Cancer and guilt can make people behave better temporarily, she pointed out, ever the pragmatist. I just don't want you hurt again when the crisis passes. Her concern was valid. I had known many people over the years who made dramatic promises during difficult times, only to revert to old patterns once the emergency faded. But something told me this transformation was different, deeper, more genuine. I'm keeping the apartment, I reminded her. It's not as if I'm selling everything and committing completely to the new arrangement. If things don't work out, I have options. Diane nodded, somewhat mollified. Smart. Always have an escape plan. That's what I taught all my clients when I was practicing family law. This isn't a legal negotiation, I laughed. It's family finding their way back to each other. Family relationships can be the most complicated legal entanglements of all, Diane replied, only half joking. Just promise me you'll maintain your independence, cancer or no cancer, house ownership or no house ownership. I promise, I assured her. This isn't about becoming dependent. It's about being close enough to receive help when needed, while still having my own space. The day I officially moved in, I was surprised to find not just Michael and Vanessa waiting to help, but a small gathering of neighbors and friends from my church. They had organized themselves into efficient teams, some unpacking books and arranging them on shelves, others hanging curtains and setting up the kitchen, still others preparing a meal to share once the work was done. Sophia Martinez, the real estate agent who had first shown Michael and Vanessa the Cedar Heights house years ago, approached me with a small gift bag. A housewarming present, she explained, handing it to me. Inside was a beautiful ceramic plaque reading, "Home is where your story begins." This is so thoughtful, I said, genuinely touched. Thank you for organizing all this. Sophia smiled warmly. Actually, it was Vanessa's idea. She called everyone, arranged the teams, coordinated the whole effort. I glanced across the room, where Vanessa was directing the placement of my reading chair near the window, positioning it to capture the best natural light. She caught my eye and smiled, a genuine expression free from the careful social mask she had worn so often in recent years. She's changed, Sophia commented, following my gaze. In a good way, less focused on appearances, more on what matters. We've all changed, I said quietly. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us what's truly important. By late afternoon, the apartment had been transformed from an empty space with a few familiar pieces to a true home. My books on the shelves, my quilt on the bed, my kettle whistling on the stove as Diane brewed tea for everyone. The neighbors and church friends gradually departed, leaving just my closest circle: Michael, Vanessa, the children, and Diane. We sat around the small dining table, enjoying a simple meal of lasagna and salad that Mrs. Jenkins from next door had prepared. The conversation flowed easily, with none of the tension or careful navigation of sensitive topics that had characterized family gatherings in recent years. "When does radiation start, Grandma?" Emma asked, her face serious as she twirled pasta on her fork. "Next Monday," I answered. "Every weekday for 6 weeks." "That's a lot of hospital visits," Jake observed with a child's directness. "It is," I agreed. "But it's how we make sure all the cancer cells are gone." Vanessa reached over to gently redirect Jake as he began building a tower with his garlic bread. "Dad and I have worked out a schedule. I'll take Grandma on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Dad will handle Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I've arranged to drive you home if either of them gets detained," Diane added. Team Ruth is fully operational. The phrase, Team Ruth, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After months of feeling increasingly isolated, the idea that multiple people were organizing their lives around supporting me was overwhelming. "Thank you all," I managed. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Michael said gently. "Just focus on getting better." We've got everything else covered." Later, after everyone had left and I was alone in my new space, I stood by the window looking out at the garden below. The autumn flowers were fading, but there was still beauty in the changing leaves of the Japanese maple Michael had planted when they first moved in. Life in transition, but no less lovely for being in flux. My phone buzzed with a text message from Vanessa. "Hope you're settling in well. The security system is linked to ours, so don't worry about setting anything. If you need anything during the night, press the intercom button by your door. Sleep well." Another small gesture of genuine care. I texted back my thanks, then prepared for bed, feeling a peace I hadn't expected. Tomorrow would bring more adjustments, more preparations for the treatment ahead. But tonight, I was home. Not my original home, not the one Henry and I had shared, but a new home within the larger fabric of family life. A place where I belonged. Radiation therapy began the following week, a new routine quickly establishing itself. Each morning brought a brief but intensely focused treatment session, followed by the rest of the day to manage the gradually accumulating fatigue. As promised, Michael and Vanessa maintained their driving schedule flawlessly, never once suggesting that their professional obligations should take precedence over my medical needs. What surprised me most was how thoroughly the children integrated me into their daily lives. Emma took to stopping by the apartment after school, often with homework she claimed needed my help, though I suspected she was checking on me as much as seeking academic assistance. Jake appointed himself my afternoon patrol, arriving precisely at 4 o'clock each day to give me a detailed report on schoolyard happenings and to ensure I had taken my afternoon medications. "Mom said I'm responsible for your snack," he announced one afternoon about 2 weeks into my treatment, carefully carrying a tray with sliced apples and cheese. "Because radiation people need extra protein." "That's very thoughtful," I said, touched by his earnest care. "Did Mom tell you that?" He nodded solemnly. "She read a whole book about it, and she has a special shopping list with radiation foods." This was news to me. I had noticed that meals appearing from the main house seemed particularly nutritious lately, but I hadn't realized Vanessa was specifically researching dietary needs for radiation patients. That evening, when Vanessa came to invite me to dinner in the main house, a regular occurrence now, though never an obligation, I mentioned Jake's comment. "He said you've been reading about nutrition for radiation patients?" Vanessa looked slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to make sure we were supporting your treatment in every way possible. The oncology nutritionist at the hospital recommended some resources." Again, I was struck by the depth of her commitment to my care. Not just the obvious necessities like transportation to appointments, but thoughtful details that showed genuine concern for my well-being. "That's above and beyond," I said sincerely. "Thank you." She shook her head. "It's what family does. I just wish." She hesitated, then continued more quietly. "I wish I had been this kind of family to you before." "We're here now," I said simply. "That's what matters." As the weeks of treatment progressed, the side effects gradually intensified. Fatigue became my constant companion, along with a persistent redness and tenderness at the treatment site. Dr. Howell assured me these were normal reactions, but they took a toll nonetheless. There were days when even walking from the apartment to the main house for dinner required more energy than I could muster. On those occasions, I discovered another change in the family dynamic. Rather than expecting me to either push through or miss out on family time, they simply adjusted. Dinner would appear at my door, not just a plate of food set aside, but the entire family, carrying dishes and utensils, transforming my small dining area into an intimate gathering place. "We thought we'd have a picnic dinner at Grandma's tonight," Michael announced one evening when I had texted that I was too tired to come over. "Unless you'd rather rest alone?" "I'd love the company," I admitted, "but only if it's not too much." Trouble. No trouble at all, Vanessa assured me, arranging serving dishes on my small table. Emma, get Grandma's nice napkins, please. Jake, careful with that water pitcher. The casual efficiency with which they adapted to the change of venue told me this wasn't a spontaneous decision, but something they had prepared for in advance. They had anticipated my needs and made arrangements to ensure I remained included, regardless of my energy levels. It was during one of these impromptu dinners in my apartment, about 4 weeks into my radiation treatment, that Michael brought up the trust documents again. Have you had a chance to review the joint ownership papers? He asked as we finished our meal. Harold called to ask if you had any questions before he finalizes everything. I had reviewed the documents, of course. Harold had gone over every detail with me during a visit the previous week. The arrangement was fair, generous even, ensuring that while ownership would be shared equally among the three of us, my financial investment was clearly documented and protected. Everything looks perfect, I assured him. Harold and I discussed it thoroughly. I'll sign whenever you're ready. No rush, Vanessa said, surprising me slightly. We want you to be completely comfortable with the arrangement. Michael nodded agreement. Exactly. This isn't about pressuring you or rushing a decision while you're focused on treatment. Their sensitivity, the absence of any suggestion that I might be using my health situation to delay the process, was yet another indication of how profoundly our family dynamic had evolved. I appreciate that, I said, but I'm comfortable moving forward. The sooner the property reflects our true family relationship, the better. We arranged to meet with Harold the following week, after my radiation session. The signing itself was brief, almost anticlimactic given the significant change it represented. Harold guided us through the documents with professional efficiency, explaining each clause, ensuring we all understood the implications of joint ownership. And that's it, he said finally, gathering the signed papers. Congratulations to all of you. The Cedar Heights property now legally belongs to all three of you equally. Michael reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, as it should have from the beginning. Better late than never, I replied, returning the squeeze. Vanessa's eyes were suspiciously bright as she added her signature to the final document. Thank you, Ruth, for everything. The house, of course, but more importantly, for giving us the chance to make things right after the way we treated you. Family is worth fighting for, I said simply, even when it's difficult, maybe especially then. As we left Harold's office, I felt a sense of completion, of a circle properly closed. The property arrangement that had begun as a gift of love, but evolved into an unintended source of imbalance had been corrected. We were now truly partners in the beautiful home that sheltered our family, equal in legal standing as we were becoming in emotional connection. The final 2 weeks of radiation treatment were the most challenging physically. The cumulative effects left me exhausted beyond anything I'd experienced before. My skin painfully tender at the treatment site, my appetite diminished. But unlike the early days of my diagnosis, when I had faced these challenges largely alone, I now found myself surrounded by support from every direction. Diane continued to visit regularly, bringing books and magazines to entertain me during long hours of rest. Church friends organized a prayer circle, sending cards and small gifts to brighten difficult days. The children's school principal, hearing about my situation, arranged for Emma and Jake to create art projects during class time specifically designed to help Grandma feel better, resulting in a gallery of colorful drawings and paintings that Vanessa carefully mounted on my apartment walls. But it was Michael and Vanessa whose support most transformed the experience. They never wavered in their commitment to my care, not just the practical logistics of treatment, but the emotional aspects as well. Michael began arriving home from work earlier than usual, often spending the early evening hours sitting quietly with me, sometimes talking, sometimes simply providing companionable silence while I rested. Vanessa, to my continued amazement, seemed to anticipate needs I hadn't even acknowledged to myself. When the skin irritation from radiation became particularly uncomfortable, she appeared with specially recommended creams and soft cotton shirts that wouldn't aggravate the tender areas. When sleep became elusive due to discomfort and worry, she researched and implemented gentle evening routines known to promote rest: lavender essential oils, specific music, carefully timed herbal teas. "You've become quite the expert on cancer. Supportive care," I observed one evening as she arranged pillows to help me find a comfortable position. "I've been learning," she admitted. "There's a support group for families of cancer patients at the hospital. I've been attending while you're in treatment." This was news to me. "You have? You never mentioned it." She straightened a pillow, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't want you to worry about me when you're the one going through treatment. But it's been helpful, learning from others who have supported family through similar journeys." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely moved by her initiative. "I'm glad you're getting support too." She sat on the edge of my bed, her expression serious. The group leader said something that really resonated with me. She said cancer happens to individuals, but it affects entire families. Everyone needs support, not just the patient. "Wise words," I agreed. "It's made me realize how lucky we are," Vanessa continued. "Despite everything, the cancer, the difficult conversations we've had to have, we're fortunate to have each other to be figuring this out together." "Yes," I said quietly. "We are." On the final day of radiation treatment, I was surprised to find not just Michael waiting to drive me home, but the entire family: Vanessa, Emma, Jake, and even Diane, standing in the hospital lobby with balloons and a small cake. "Congratulations," they chorused as I emerged from the treatment area, a handmade sign reading, "Ruth finished radiation," held proudly by the children. "We wanted to celebrate this milestone," Michael explained, hugging me gently, mindful of my tender skin. 6 weeks of treatment, completed successfully. "The doctor said we could have a small party," Vanessa added. "Nothing too exhausting, of course." I was touched beyond words, looking at their beaming faces. The oncology nurses, familiar with such family celebrations, quickly arranged for us to use a small conference room where we could share the cake and take photos to commemorate the occasion. "What happens next, Grandma?" Emma asked as we enjoyed our celebration. "Now we wait and see," I explained. "The radiation will keep working in my body for a while. In about 4 weeks, I'll have tests to see how effective the treatment has been." "And you'll be taking hormone therapy pills," Michael added, demonstrating his own research into my treatment plan. "To reduce the risk of the cancer returning." I nodded. "That's right. It's a long-term medication, but much easier than radiation." "Will you still be tired all the time?" Jake asked, practical as always. "Not like now," I assured him. "The fatigue should gradually improve over the next few weeks." "Good," he said decisively, "because you promised to teach me chess when you weren't too tired anymore." I laughed, delighted by his matter-of-fact assumption that our relationship would continue to develop, would include new activities and learning experiences together. So I did, and I keep my promises. The recovery period after radiation proved to be a time of gentle healing, not just physically but emotionally and relationally as well. As my energy slowly returned, I found myself naturally incorporated into the daily rhythms of family life in ways that felt organic rather than obligatory. Morning coffee with Vanessa became a regular ritual, a quiet half-hour before the children woke and the day's activities began. Weekend board games with the entire family established themselves as tradition rather than special events. Sunday dinners expanded to include Diane regularly, and occasionally other friends from my church or neighborhood. Most significantly, the artificial boundaries that had once relegated me to the periphery of family life disappeared entirely. I was consulted on decisions affecting the household, included in discussions about the children's education and activities, welcomed into any room of the house at any time without hesitation. 6 weeks after completing radiation, I returned to the hospital for follow-up tests, a mammogram, blood work, and consultations with both Dr. Howell and my oncologist, Dr. Patel. Michael took the day off to accompany me, his presence a steady comfort through the various procedures. We sat together in Dr. Patel's office, waiting for the results with the particular tension familiar to anyone who has faced cancer. The minutes stretched endlessly until finally the door opened and Dr. Patel entered, a slim folder in his hands and a smile on his face. "Good news, Mrs. Wilson," he said without preamble. "The mammogram shows no evidence of remaining cancer. Your blood work looks excellent. All indications are that the surgery and radiation have been successful." Relief flooded through me, so powerful it left me momentarily speechless. Michael grasped my hand tightly, his own emotion evident in the slight tremor of his fingers. "So she's cancer-free?" he asked, seeking absolute clarity. "Based on all current testing, yes," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Of course, we'll continue monitoring regularly, and the hormone therapy will significantly reduce the risk of recurrence. But right now, everything looks very good." The drive home passed in a blur of emotion: relief, gratitude, cautious joy. Michael called Vanessa from the car, sharing the good news in a voice tight with suppressed tears. By the time we arrived at Cedar Heights, Vanessa had already spread the word. The driveway was lined with balloons, and a banner hung across the garage apartment door. "Congratulations, Ruth! Cancer-free!" The children raced out to meet us, their excitement palpable. Emma had created a special card with "No More Cancer," decorated in glitter and sequins. Jake presented me with another of his special rocks, this one painted with a triumphant superhero figure he identified as Grandma the Cancer Fighter. Diane arrived moments later, champagne in hand, her usual pragmatic demeanor softened by evident emotion. "I knew you'd beat it," she said firmly, embracing me. "You're too stubborn not to." The impromptu celebration continued into the evening, neighbors stopping by with flowers and good wishes, church friends calling to express their joy at the news. Through it all, I observed something remarkable: the natural, easy way Michael and Vanessa included me in the center of the gathering, the genuine pride and relief in their expressions, the unconscious physical proximity they maintained, as if reassuring themselves of my continued presence. This was not the polite accommodation of an obligation. This was not the careful management of a difficult family member. This was love, messy, imperfect, but genuine love. Family as it should be. Later that night, after the visitors had departed and the children were in bed, the three of us sat in the main house's living room, quietly processing the events of the day. "So what happens now?" Vanessa asked, curled comfortably in an armchair, her guard completely lowered in the way I had once thought I might never see. "With your treatment, I mean." "Hormone therapy for at least 5 years," I explained. "Regular checkups, of course, but otherwise, back to normal life." "Define normal," Michael said with a slight smile. "Because some things have changed permanently, I think." He was right, of course. We couldn't return to the family dynamic that had existed before my diagnosis, before the confrontation about the house, before the painful truths had been spoken aloud, nor would we want to. "A new normal," I agreed. "One where I don't eat in the kitchen while you entertain in the dining room." Vanessa flinched slightly at the reference, but nodded. "One where we never take each other for granted again. One where we remember what really matters," Michael added. "Beyond career success or social standing or material possessions. Family," I said simply, in all its complicated, wonderful reality. We sat together in comfortable silence for a few moments, each lost in our own thoughts. Then Vanessa straightened slightly, her expression becoming more serious. "Ruth, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you about your apartment in town." I tensed slightly, wondering if now that my treatment was complete, they expected me to return to my original home. The garage apartment had become more than just a convenient location for cancer treatment. It had become a true home, integrated into the larger family dwelling in a way that felt right and natural. "What about it?" I asked carefully. Michael and I were wondering if you might consider making the garage apartment your permanent residence," Vanessa said, her words coming in a rush now. "The children love having you here. We love having you here. And your apartment in town could be rented out for additional income to cover any medical expenses not covered by insurance." Relief and gratitude washed over me. "You're not tired of having me underfoot all the time?" "Just the opposite," Michael assured me. "These past months, despite the difficult circumstances, have been how family should be. Connected, supportive, present for each other." "The children would be thrilled," Vanessa added. "Emma's already talking about summer gardening projects with you, and Jake has at least 20 more board games he wants you to teach him." I smiled at their eagerness, their genuine desire to maintain the closeness we had developed. "What about when I'm older? When I might need more care? I wouldn't want to become a burden." "Family is never a burden," Vanessa said firmly. "And we would figure it out together, just as we've figured out the cancer treatment. That's what families do." "Besides," Michael added, "the garage apartment was designed with aging in place in mind. It's all on one level, with wide doorways, accessible bathroom features, everything you might need." They had clearly given this significant thought, not just responding emotionally to the good news of the day. "I'd like that very much," I said finally, allowing myself to embrace the future they were offering. One where I remained an integral part of their daily lives, where the painful lessons of the past had transformed into a new family covenant of mutual respect and genuine care. Vanessa's smile was radiant. "Wonderful. We can make it official whenever you're ready." As I returned to my apartment that night, my home within the larger family home, I found myself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had led to this moment of belonging. How the hurt of being relegated to the kitchen had ultimately opened the door to honest conversation, to recognition of my true place in the family, to healing of wounds I hadn't even fully acknowledged. Sometimes, it seemed, we have to reach a breaking point before rebuilding can begin. Sometimes truth, however painful, is the only foundation strong enough to support genuine love. And sometimes, the homes we create with open hearts prove far more important than the houses we legally own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.